Welcome to Contemporary First Nation Voices, NBE 3C, Grade 11 English College Level, and this is Jillian Percy. This is Class 19, Key Question 29, and, sorry, here are all the ways to contact me. Studio number is 1-800-465-7144. The office number is 1-800-667-3703, extension 2211. My email is jillian.percy@nnec.on.ca. My Facebook is capital G, capital P, ERCY, space, capital W, AHSA. If you send me a message through Facebook, please let me have a little friend request as well. And let me know what your full name is and what course you are taking. So for example, if you are Rachel somebody, I've got a lot of different Rachels, right? So I have to know what your last name is. For the classes that are recorded, there are two different channels. One is my teacher channel, which is also called G Percy Wassa. That says all my courses from this year and last year. And then the Wassa Distance Education YouTube channel is the school channel, and that has all the courses from this year. Okay, if you're going to hand in work, there are multiple ways to hand in assignments. Number one, you can give it to the DEC at the Learning Center, ask them to scan it, and then send it to me. Hang on to your originals because you will need them later on for a portfolio project. You can fax it to me at 1-800-463-7852, that's in Ontario, or 1-877-990-2023 if you are outside of Ontario. You can scan it yourself using a scanner up on your phone and then send it to me in email. You can mail it to me, but if you do that, please be sure to hang on to the originals. This will take a long time and things do sometimes get lost, so this is not my recommended way, but it is a possible way. You can share documents with me if you do them through Google Docs. When you do that, you need to include me as the editor so that I'm able to see it. I won't actually edit anything, it just gives me the ability to do things. Hand assignments in by photograph through Facebook or email. When you do that, the photograph must be clear and not blurry. It should preferably be written in pen so it's dark enough to read. The photo must be taken with the phone parallel to the assignment so the writing does not get distorted. Please do not just click the share button. It will come up at an odd size on the computer. And don't put it in the body of the email. Instead, save it as a file and then write me an email and attach it to the email. Whenever you hand in work, please send it to studentwork@nnec.on.ca. This way the secretary can log that you submitted the work and it can be retrieved later on if we need to for any reason. Please include your full name, the course name, the assignment number, and name. If an assignment asks for both a rough and a good draft, please label which one is which and include them both in the same email. Okay, this is like a little tiny mini cheat sheet on how to use the Adobe Scan. I use Adobe Scan because it's free and Adobe is considered pretty reliable. Once you install it, you open it, take the picture of your assignment, adjust the borders if you need to. If you have another page, just keep on repeating that until you've got all the pages scanned. Tap continue when you're done. Then it'll let you preview and see if you want to change anything, retake a picture, change the order. Save PDF. Once you've saved the PDF, they want you to give it a name, obviously like, assignment 25 or whatever it is. You can save your file to Google Drive, Dropbox, your phone, whatever, and then send me an email and attach it to that email. Okay, so we are almost at the week, end of week number 5 here. We are on the last question for Unit 2, Lesson 10, and we're looking at key question 29. Remember that next week is March break and we will not be here, including the secretary. There's no one here to answer phones even. Also, because we're having a tech update over the March break, I will not have access to my laptop and will not be able to check emails or Facebooks or anything like that. So normally I can answer those kind of things during March break. I will not be able to this week. So if you have any questions you need to ask me, tomorrow is the last day of this week to be able to call me and ask me for help with anything, okay? Obviously, once we're back from March break, I can happily answer questions as well. Okay, hang on a second. Sorry guys, fighting a little bit of cold here and talking too much definitely triggers it. Okay, some assignments have been added, changed, or eliminated. So the numbers I'm showing you may not match your assignment numbers. You're welcome to hand in either the original or the revised version until the end of the school year. If you're watching this though next year and it's like past September 25, then be aware that you might have an outdated version. Make sure you get the revised version as soon as possible. It's still probably the best idea to get the revised version because normally I've either gotten rid of assignments that don't work, tried to clarify assignments that were confusing to people, or added assignments that better met the expectations the government currently has. So this is the end of our Unit 2 storytelling unit, lesson 10. And the big thing here is that we are going to look at everything we've done in the previous lessons and use the writing process to create a short story or a legend or whatever you like. The rules of dialogue will also be explored in order to help you with your story writing. Okay, plot structure. The plot is the sequence of events and the organization of these elements so they generate interest, suspense, and surprise for the reader. The plot of a narrative usually follows this basic structure. Now they're calling the first part exposition. I would normally call that the beginning. And usually you'd introduce the character and the setting there. And then the rising action. Rising action is there's some sort of goal or conflict or problem that the hero is trying to overcome, and obstacles keep getting in the way, and things get more and more exciting or more difficult, right up until you hit the climax. The climax is going to be the most exciting part of the story, the most difficult part, the big car chase, the giant fight, the whatever it's going to be, that's going to be your most exciting spot. And usually that's where the problem is close to solved. And then the following action is where things become slowly less exciting, but all the different things that happened get slowly wrapped up. And the resolution is kind of more of just a fancy way to say the problem is solved and we are at the end. Okay, so this is what they call the general purpose of each section of the plot. For the first part, the reader learns the background information needed to understand the story. The setting is established, the characters are introduced, and a conflict is introduced or at least hinted towards. In the rising action, the protagonist faces one or more challenges or complications. The issue begins to worsen, and then these problems start to move the plot towards the climax, creating suspense. Climax is the highest point of tension. It could range from a life or death situation to a tense emotional moment. The reader realizes who or what is going to succeed in winning the conflict. This is usually happening about 2/3 to 3/4 of the way through the story. If it happens too quick, there's no point for the rest of the story. But if it happens too late, the following action can like not be enough and the reader feels a little bit like gypped and left out of what's going on. The following action, these are the actions that help to unravel, solve, and deal with the problem that leads us towards the resolution. The resolution is the ending or the solution. Sometimes it can involve a surprise twist. The final outcome of the conflict, whether it's resolved or unresolved. In other words, did they fix the problem? Sometimes they don't fix the problem. Sometimes the character realizes, oh, I thought this problem was what was supposed to get fixed, but actually I needed to change my attitude, or I needed to find a different way to solve this, or whatever. It kind of depends on the story, right? But either way, the tension is broken, and the reader feels some sense of closure about the events, even if the story didn't necessarily end happily, right? Because not all stories do end happily. Okay, the main plot of the story revolves around a conflict that the protagonist must face. The most common conflict types are person versus person, right? Where you're having a conflict with another person. It doesn't necessarily mean a physical fight. Like it could be you and your rival are both trying to win the beauty pageant. It could mean you and someone else you don't know are both trying to get the same job. It could be anything that involves you kind of competing with somebody else in some way. Person versus self, this is where you're struggling with your own internal thoughts, your own internal desires with what you want on one side and what you want on the other side. Like you're kind of conflicted. You want two things at once. Person versus society, this is where a person's beliefs, desires, actions differ from the norm, right? Or they aren't accepted in society for one reason or another. It isn't necessarily always like against the law. Societies still have customs and traditions that they enforce pretty brutally, whether or not the law exists, but it also changes. Like different countries, even right now, have different societal beliefs. Like drugs are treated pretty lightly over here, but like say over in China, that can get you like, very drastic consequences. What society believes is correct or acceptable changes from country to country, from region to region, and from time to time. All right, person versus environment. This is where they are facing some sort of natural environmental issue that is threatening to their survival. It could be extreme cold, it could be a flood or a hurricane or an earthquake, anything where they're not really fighting a person. It's just like nature is being so threatening that there's a chance they might not survive. Things like Twister would be an example of that kind of thing, right? Okay, literary devices. These are smaller techniques that writers use to create particular effects in their writing and to enhance the reader's experience. They can help to convey their themes, develop the characters, and build tension. Tension is considered a good thing in reading, okay? Another way to put it would be like exciting. Let's look at some of the most common literary devices used in short stories. Okay, so a simile is when you're comparing two things to give you a kind of a better visual or emotional sense of how those two things relate. Like if I say his words cut her like a knife, obviously your words can't physically cut somebody, but they mean they were mean, they were painful, they really hurt her heart, right? Metaphor. This is another comparison, but you're not using like or as, okay? You just say something is something, like time is a thief, silently stealing moments. Okay, well, obviously time isn't really a thief, but it's giving you a way to picture time that is different than expected. Personification. This is when human qualities are given to non-human objects. The sun smiled down on us. Obviously, the sun's not really smiling, but we picture that, right? Imagery. This is where you have descriptive language that appeals to the senses. Sometimes they're called sensory details. It helps the readers to visualize scenes with all your five senses. So visual, sight. The golden sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Auditory. The leaves crunched softly under his feet as he tread through the forest. Smell. The aroma of freshly baked bread wafted through the air of the warm kitchen. Ooh, taste. The chocolate melted on her tongue, the rich and sweet taste lingering afterwards. Touch. He wrapped his fingers around the cool metal railing, feeling the chill seep into his skin. And then movement. The dancers' movements were fluid and synchronized, as if they were gliding on air. So all those types of descriptive details are a way to help your reader feel like they are right there experiencing the story rather than just reading the story. Okay. Foreshadowing is when there's a little bit of a hint at the beginning or even in the middle of the story about some things that might happen later or how the story might end, what might happen to a character. As she walked through the dark, quiet forest, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. In that kind of story, we will later find out that somebody was, in fact, watching her and probably they're a threat to her. Symbolism. This is where we use simple symbols, such as objects, characters, or events to represent larger ideas or themes. So, for example, we often use the symbol of the red cross to show that there's a hospital nearby, or the symbol of a dove is often shown to represent the idea of peace. The storm raged on outside, the thunder booming, lightning flashing as she grappled with the difficult decision ahead. I wouldn't just call that symbolism, I'd call it something else. But, anyways, the idea here is the storm is kind of symbolizing her decision. It's the kind of thing where funerals will often have a gray, rainy day, even though in real life, of course, funerals happen on all sorts of days, including sunny days. But it's kind of giving you an idea of how people are feeling. So short stories are a really important part of literature because they offer powerful, compact, short little narratives that allow us to explore deep ideas in just a few pages. So remember, when you are analyzing or creating a short story, focus on the following. Identify your key elements. Focus on the plot, the characters, the setting, the themes, the point of view, and any literary devices they're using. Look for the meaning, or when you're writing, make sure you've got meaning in there. Every story has deeper layers. Pay attention to important themes and emotions. Ask questions. Consider how your choices affect the reader's feelings and might guide their interpretation of the story. Engage deeply. Make connections between the character's actions, the symbols used, and the message that you are trying to give to your reader. Keep practicing. The more you write, the better you'll become at spotting literacy devices, creating them, and helping them to create meaning in your stories. Okay, so we have here a little bit of information on punctuating dialogue. Okay, the most important part to know about punctuating dialogue, because there's a lot of little fussy things. The most important part is make sure your quotation marks at the beginning of somebody talking and at the end of someone talking. That is the most important thing. So usually there's also what they call a tag. A tag is when it tells you who's talking and how they are talking, okay? So here we've got, I said, comma, quotation marks, the fable by James Thurber will surprise you, quotation marks. Okay, so if that's what I'm quoting their exact words. However, sometimes we're kind of summarizing what somebody said. We're not quoting their exact words. We're just kind of getting the gist across. And here I said that the fable by James Thurber would surprise you. I probably said a whole lot more. That's just the part they're telling you about. Number 2, if a question mark or an exclamation point occurs where one of the separating commas should be used, omit the comma and use the question mark or exclamation point to separate the quoted material. Okay, so basically what they mean here, when you have the quotation at front, we don't usually use a period here because then it looks like you have 2 short sentences. Don't be late, period. Bill warned, period. We usually just put a comma there instead. However, if it's anything beyond a comma, if it's an exclamation point or a question mark, we do put it there because those are so important to the meaning and because those aren't as confusing to readers because they aren't the exact same type of punctuation. The speaker's words are set off from the rest of the sentence with quotation marks, and the first word of the quotation is capitalized. When the end of the quote is also the end of the sentence, then we put a period inside the quotation marks. So this is the first word in his sentence, so we still capitalize it. It's not the first word of our sentence, but it's the first word of what he's saying. And then we're ending in a period. We don't need to put a second period there at the end. That one period basically does double duty for both the quotation and the entire sentence. Number 4, both parts of a divided quotation are enclosed in quotation marks. The first word in the second part of the quotation is not given a capital unless it begins a new sentence. This fable, our teacher said, is a twist of an old tale. So when it said the word is, the new quote is starting, but because it's not a new sentence, I didn't put a capital there. If I did start a new sentence, then yeah, I'd still put a capital. Okay, number 5. When writing only part of a quoted sentence, do not begin that quote with a capital letter unless the person you're quoting capitalized it or it's the first word in your sentence. So sometimes people, especially like newspapers or quotes from literature, might have a really long sentence. You're not going to use the whole sentence. You're just using the part that relates that you want. So here we have a film critic has called the movie a futile attempt by the director to trade in his reputation as a creator of blockbusters. It's not the whole quote, so I didn't put a capital there. Now, normally I would put a little ... to show that it's not the beginning of the sentence either. I'm not sure why they didn't. Quotes within quotes. If you need to have one character directly quoting another character, then use double quotes for the first one and a single quote for the quote within a quote. That is super complicated. If you do not get it right, do not worry. I do not expect it. It's one of those things you kind of pick up as you go along. Okay. Periods and commas always go inside the quotation marks. Now it's saying here that colons and semicolons always go outside, and Here, okay, so semicolon because it's marking the end of the entire sentence and there's a whole nother sentence. That's a very strange structural format, though. I would not generally create a sentence that way. Question marks and exclamation marks can go either inside or outside the quotation marks, depending on the sentence. They go inside when the question or exclamation point is showing you how the person spoke. Like she asked, who did it? She's asking you a question. Or did she say, I'm quitting? So in that case, the person is asking a question, but they are wanting to quote the other person at the same time. Again, those are really tricky little fussy things. I would not worry too much about them. In fact, I'm going to skip right over those. You can go back and read that when you want to. When you write dialogue, begin a new paragraph whenever the speaker changes. This is huge. It's an automatic little convention that we use that lets your reader know, oh, someone new is talking. I would also say it's a good idea to put the person's name at the beginning of that, but it kind of depends on how much writing you're doing. If you're writing for kids, which is what we're doing, that can be really helpful to let them know the speaker has changed because kids often won't notice that kind of thing, okay? You can use a pair of dashes to indicate an abrupt break in a thought or speech or an unfinished statement or question. So like if your person is talking and they get cut off in the middle of talking, then you just put like a little dash to show, oh, they weren't really finished speaking. And then when they do finish their sentence, you put a beginning dash to show it, okay? Again, that's a very obscure thing. I'm not sure why they feel like they've got to tell you this, but they do. Like I said, the most important part is make sure the words go inside the quotation marks. That's really what I'm looking for. If you have the same speaker talking and they're talking for a lot, you may want to keep everything in one paragraph, but if it's a really long speech, you may need to separate it into separate paragraphs. Like if you're talking about, say, a lawyer who's making a big speech in court, if you created their entire speech as one big paragraph, it may be way too much. So separating it into two separate parts or three or four separate parts might be really helpful. Okay. Yep, we did that. So here, yeah, I don't know if they can see this. I actually disagree with this. I don't do this. This may be correct, but I'm gonna tell you right now, this is just not what I would generally expect to see. And I really would not normally do it this way at all. They've, for some reason, not used the ends quotes. I don't know why. I really think that they should. There might be some really obscure reason why they haven't. For me, I don't know why they've separated this into different paragraphs. There's no reason why this couldn't be all one giant paragraph. That's just my opinion. All right, and then ellipsis. Ellipsis points are kind of used a little bit like a dash. They indicate a pause in the written dialogue, okay? Well, dot, 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 I don't know. It just lets you know that the person paused while they were speaking. All right, so you have read a lot of different stories in this unit. It's your turn to write a story of your own. You can write a story based in modern life or based in the past. The idea, though, is that it's targeted towards children, okay? Do make sure that you've completed, oh, they're saying key question 29. It's not. Key question 28 in lesson 9 was a whole graphic organizer about doing your planning. Please make sure you've done that first or you're not really going to be able to do the next part. Okay, so first of all, we want to have a glossary. We want you to try to use some of your native language, whichever one it is, in the story, just like we saw being used in some of the stories that we were reading, okay? Choose at least 5 words that you're going to use in your story. Give me what the native word is and then what the English translation is. You are welcome to use more words if you want, but you will need to provide a glossary definition of each new word so that I can read it and know what it's saying, basically, okay? If you don't have a whole lot of words, you can use the online dictionaries that we talked about yesterday, or you can ask a friend or a family member for help with that part, okay? It should look something like this, okay? So if I put miigwech, then I would put thank you, right? Gukum, grandma, whatever it is, just so that your reader, whoever it is, can read the story, right? And especially if you're talking to children, which is what we're aiming for, then you're also getting a chance to teach the children some Indigenous languages. All right, you also need to do a rough draft. It should have visible evidences of revisions and changes on it. Your rough draft should be about 300 to 500 words. That's typically a page and a half typed, or maybe around 3 pages handwritten. Now, occasionally students get mixed up and do their brainstorming as their rough draft. That is one reason why I did the brainstorming last lesson. So it's already finished. You don't need to do it again. This point should be your honest attempt to try and write a short story, and it should have all the elements expected of a short story, okay? There should be evidence of major revisions of the original rough draft, which might include writing on the original or doing a second rough draft. We're going to talk a little bit more about this because students are sometimes struggling on how to improve their work. Final copy. That obviously is your best copy, should be typed, should have significant improvements from the rough copy. Again, should also be between at least 300 to 500 words. If you go over that, that's fine, but don't go less than that. You just won't be able to write a good story less than that, okay? Now, narrative and dialogue. I use these two terms a lot when I'm discussing short stories, and I wanted to be sure they're understood. Dialogue is when people are talking to each other. Narrative is literally everything else in the story besides the dialogue. So narrative might be describing a character or the setting. Narrative might be revealing a character's thoughts. It might express a narrator's point of view or the writer's point of view. So a lot of people struggle with how to make revisions to the rough draft, and often the first way people think of how to say something may be the only way they can think of how to say something. Other times people feel like, yeah, it's not quite right, but I just don't really know what to do to make it better. So I'm going to kind of summarize the most common difficulties with revision and how to fix them. Apologies. All right. Number one, it's way too short, but I don't know how to make it longer. Most times, when people are having stories that are too short, it's because they're summarizing what happened rather than slowing down and telling it as a story where the character walks through the events moment by moment. Here is an example of what that might look like. I hated school. The teachers were always so mean and the other kids bullied me. It was terrible. That's a summary. That's not really a story. I began to hate going to school. I would leave the house and start out happy, enjoying the sun and the sound of the wind through the trees. Then, as I spotted the school, my steps would slow down. I could see the other kids also walking to school, and I began to scan them anxiously, praying that I wouldn't see David and his horrible gang of friends. I was rarely so lucky. They were almost always there, snickering and pushing each other. Everyone gave them a wide space, as no one else wanted to become a target either. I would play a game with myself to see how slowly I could walk, so that I could arrive exactly as the bell rang to go into school. Any spare moment on the playground with them before that bell went off was one more moment they had to call me names, push me down, or even hit me. My teacher often scolded me for being late, but even her angry voice was a better way to start the day than covered in bruises and dirt. Here I'm telling a story, and you can see that took so much longer to do. So if yours is way too short, there's a really strong chance it's because you summarized rather than told a story. To switch yourself over to trying to tell a story, imagine yourself as the character walking through the actual events. What do you hear, smell, taste, touch, or see? What are you thinking inside? How are you feeling? When you slow down and begin to include all these little details, it helps your reader feel like they are a character walking in the story. 2, it's perfect the way it is. How could I possibly make it better? I love all my ideas. I love my story. What more can I do? While I admire this particular viewpoint and self-confidence, it is a little bit arrogant, okay? Because if even professional writers can make improvements in their writing, I think we probably can too, okay? So some advice if you have this difficulty. Suggestion A, first of all, ask a friend to read it and see if they have any parts they're confused at or that they should be improved. That's the greatest way, is just getting a second opinion. Suggestion B, are there enough visual details? Have you described the setting? Have you described the characters enough? Like, can the person picture them? If they just show up, David starts talking, but I don't know anything. Is David tall, short, fat, thin? Is he elegant? Is he scruffy? I have no idea. You got to give me some description. Okay. Suggestion C, is there enough dialogue to help make your characters come to life? Some people get really busy on describing everything, but they forget to use the dialogue. Dialogue is kind of like where we get to spy on the characters and see them, and it's usually something that makes the story a lot more interesting. Suggestion D, is your plot interesting? Do you need more obstacles? Is the ending satisfying? E, check your vocabulary. Are your words vivid and interesting? F, check your sentence structure and your variety. Is there a mixture of longer and shorter sentences to give it an interesting flow? Is there a variety of simple, compound, and complex sentences? Have you avoided incomplete and run-on sentences? All of those are really common issues in student work, and it is an area I really look at to see how your sense of grammar is going. That is the key area I am looking at for students, okay? Number 3, I think my story is kind of boring. How do I make it more interesting? This problem seems like the opposite of number 2, but it's kind of often solved in the exact same way. Run through all the list of suggestions for number 2 to make it more interesting. One new suggestion to consider. Have you got a conflict in the story? Is there a problem that they need to solve? Sometimes it's boring because there's no real problem or conflict to overcome or a new goal to reach. Stop and think about who or what the person in the story is fighting. Are they fighting themselves or another person? Are they struggling to survive in a natural disaster or a hostile environment? Are they fighting against society's expectations or laws? Are they fighting against technology or the supernatural? If you aren't fighting, or their character aren't fighting against anybody or anything, you are going to need to add that conflict in. Okay, that's the one thing, is that definitely can create a boring story. Number 4, I don't know how to express my theme or message without just having one of the characters say it. Now, this is a really common problem because, this is actually a pretty high level thing. Asking you to create a theme, it may be something you've never been asked before. Okay, that's a very high level thing that we're asking. Okay, generally, the theme is heavily tied into the plot and conflict in the story. So, for example, let's say the message that you're wanting to send children is bravery can help you preserve your Indigenous culture. Well, then your conflict should have someone choosing to be brave and standing up for their culture against another person or against society. And in this case, they should also win the battle because that's kind of part of what your message is. Now, a character doesn't need to come right out and say the exact words of your message or theme, but the events that happen will help to illustrate or show your message. It's possible there might be some dialogue or some interior thoughts that help to emphasize the message. Here's an example. I want to get the new teacher to call me by my native name, not my English name, I said. Gookum says, have you told her that? No, I said, I'm scared. What if she gets angry? Well, you won't know until you talk to her. Maybe stay for a few minutes after school and see if she will listen to you then, Gookum suggested. I haven't quite come out and had Gookum say, you need to be brave, but it's kind of implied in their conversation, right? Okay. I don't like the ending. How can I wrap it up? Besides the theme, I actually think wrapping up a story and writing a good ending is one of the trickiest parts of good writing, even for professional writers, because it's the last thing that the reader sees, and it can kind of make or break your story. A great ending is it just leaves a great taste in your reader's mouth. They just remember it. They want to read more of your stuff. But if you kind of flop the ending, they can be like, oh, I'm disappointed, right? So yeah, a good ending is important. But if this is your main problem, you are in good company, okay? There are 6 main kind of categories of ending. Number 1 is resolved. The problem is over. It may have been resolved in a positive way, like war was avoided. I know probably not for our stories, but a negative way, the war began. But either way, there's nothing more to be done. The issue is basically over one way or the other. Open or unresolved. In this one, the problem hasn't been fixed, and the characters may be feeling many different things, and it's difficult to know where the story is going to go. This is very, very difficult to do well. So I would be cautious about that at this level. Ambiguous. This is where the ending's a bit mysterious. The reader might not be exactly sure what happened, or sometimes the ending could be interpreted in more than one way, like, oh, suddenly Sarah knew what she must do next. And one reader might be going, oh, yeah, that means, we're going to start a new job. And the other person is thinking, oh, it means it's time to leave town and get a whole new life. Different people may interpret that. It's a little bit ambiguous. They aren't spelling it out. A surprise twist. Something unexpected comes up and changes everything or changes how you view everything. Closed circle. The story ends in a way that brings you back to the beginning in some way. If you've ever read If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, those kind of stories where you end up somehow back at the beginning of what happened, those can be really interesting if done well. And then epilogue or a jump in time. This is where most of the story occurs and it sounds like it's in the present, but then there'll be like a little space and they'll add like another paragraph or two and you've suddenly jumped forward and maybe the characters are now 20 years older and you get to kind of see the consequences from the choices they made way back when. That's tricky to do, but it can be really interesting. Okay, some possible strategies to create a good ending. You can end with a bit of dialogue that shows what the characters have learned or feel or how they've grown. You can end with a character thinking or reflecting back on the events and drawing their own conclusions about what happened. That's a very popular way to do it. You can end with a new action that's about to begin that shows what's been achieved or learnt. And you could also end with a description of the setting or the character that helps evoke the mood or the atmosphere or the overall theme of the story. So if the overall kind of message was a bit sad, maybe as you're describing the character, you're making it clear how sad and overwhelmed they are, kind of thing. So those are some ways that you can try. Okay, so when you are doing your rough draft and trying to revise it, sometimes people aren't sure what they need to fix. This is a checklist of the most common things that people do wrong. I know a lot of times people say only put what's right, but I find sometimes what's right is very vague. And if I put what's wrong, it's more specific and people know, oh, okay, that's what I'm not going to do. So if you forgot to put a capital letter at the beginning of every sentence, time to go back and fix that. If you forgot to use a capital for the names of people, places, or businesses, time to fix that. If you forgot to use a capital on the word I, time to fix that. 2 and 2, the 3 different ways to spell that, if you got that mixed up. TO is direction, TWO is the number, TOO means also. Same thing, I got there, and there mixed up. THERE is direction, EIR is belonging, and THEY apostrophe RE is a contraction of they and are. And then there's some other homophones that are really commonly confused. Lose versus loose, affect versus effect, and then versus than. The other one I find people use sometimes is they use an apostrophe to show a plural. If I'm talking about there's all these buildings downtown and I say apostrophe S, that is wrong because apostrophe S is showing me that it belongs to somebody, right? So the building's roof was falling down would make sense, but I see a lot of buildings doesn't work. I just use an S. I joined 2 or more sentences using a comma instead of a semicolon or a conjunction plus a comma. So I was always late, comma, I hated school. That's wrong. You can't do that. I was always late, semicolon, I hated school. That's just fine. I was always late, comma, because I hated school. That is also fine. I've got a lot of sentence fragments. Usually I find it's because the sentence is missing a subject. So, for example, they write something like this. I got in trouble a lot as a kid. For example, fighting and skipping school. The first sentence is fine, but the second sentence, there's no subject. Now, it's implied that it's I, but they haven't stated it. And in English, you kind of have to state it. So here it would look like I got in a lot of trouble as a kid. For example, I was often fighting and skipping school. Now it's got a subject and it's fine. I have run-on sentences. I've joined many sentences into one long sentence. To fix this, split the large sentence up into smaller sentences. Be sure that each smaller sentence gets its own subject, okay? So when I'm marking your rough draft, I am looking to make sure that you've got a setting, that you've effectively described the place and time through the narrative or the dialogue. I'm looking to make sure that you've described your characters, how they look, how their personality is, and that you've showed who they are through their dialogue, thoughts, and actions. I am looking to make sure you've got a conflict. There's a problem or a conflict they're trying to solve, and they develop a solution by the end. Theme, your theme is revealed through the conflict, dialogue, thinking, actions, or solution. So here it says my plot uses one of the two plot structures. I actually didn't end up going into the second plot structure today. So just use the main plot structure to create a rising sense of excitement that hits a high point and then slows down as the story is wrapped up and the problem solved. So this is worth, I believe, 12 marks. Excuse me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, no, 10 marks. If you do it really well, you get 2 marks. If you do it somewhat, 1.5. If you do it poorly, 1 mark. Okay, and then here's the revision. Here's where I'm looking to see what you've fixed. Have you changed the dialogue to make it more interesting, realistic, or revealing of the personality or theme? Have you revised the narrative to make it more descriptive or interesting in describing characters, setting, or plot events? Have you changed the beginning or the ending to make it grab attention, clarify the issues, the characters, or the theme? Or, I'm not sure what I was having there. The tone, the vocabulary, or the writing style to make your ideas, character, plot, or theme more effective? Have you improved the sentence structure or variety? Okay. Now, occasionally I have people feel like they need to make some really obvious mistakes in the rough copy so they can fix them to get these marks. You don't need to do that. If you're already a really good writer, and I know some people are, you don't need to deliberately make mistakes so that I can see you fix them. If it's already perfect sentence structure, I will just give you the full marks, okay? Same thing for spelling, punctuation, capitalization, grammar, and usage. I have noticed some people will deliberately make some very easy spelling mistakes in their rough copy so they can fix them and get the points. If your spelling's perfect and your punctuation perfect and it's all perfect, I will just give you the full marks. So please don't make a deliberate mistake. But I do encourage you to check these because they are really commonly areas where I find problems, okay? Even my own writing, like it's just so easy to make those kind of errors. Okay, hang on a sec. Okay, so this is the final copy marking rubric. I'm looking at your knowledge. Did you demonstrate an understanding of the concepts and elements of a short story? 4 marks for that part. Thinking and inquiry. I'm looking at your planning skills, how you generated your ideas, how you gathered your stuff up, organized your information, how you used your creative processing skills. 6 marks for that. Communication. How did you express and organize your ideas in the format of a short story? How did you communicate to different audiences for different purposes? In this case, you're communicating to children. So I'm going to be looking to make sure that it's something that children would find interesting and readable. And then use of conventions. That's the spelling, punctuation, capitalization issue. And then application is that you apply your understanding of writing processes and strategies in familiar contexts and transfer to new contexts. So I don't necessarily know if you've written other children's stories, so I don't know if it's familiar or new, so I'm kind of using them both at once here. So communication skills are 6 because it's a writing project, and then application is 4. So that all is worth about 20 marks. And then at that point, you are finished Unit 2. This would be a great project to work on over March break and then hand it in to me after March break. Once we come back, we've got 4 more weeks. We'll spend about 2 weeks on Unit 3 and 2 weeks on Unit 4, and then we will be all finished. If you have any questions about your assignments, give me a phone call and I would be happy to talk to you about them.